My name is Joe Maletti, and
Where's Jonathan?
I'm executive vice president of Avid Bank, and also Los Altos resident, and currently the board chair of the chamber this year, and will be chairing today's Government Affairs Committee. So welcome everybody for the call here, and we get to welcome the three candidates that the chamber has endorsed, and that is Jonathan Weinberg, who's on the call. We have Kuljeet Kalkat on the call, and we also have Sally Meadows on the call here. So with that, I know we got a lot to cover here. We're gonna go through and ask them a few questions, let them spend a couple minutes to respond to each one, and then at the end we'll do kind of a Q&A and open it up for people at that point. So so with that, I'll turn it over to Kim, who's on the call as well, and she'll handle the questions here. So Kim, you want to take it over?
Sure. So good morning, first of all. Good morning, Kim Mosley. Great to see you all this morning, and thanks so much for coming to join us at our government affairs session and to get to know our city council candidates better, those that we have specifically endorsed here at the Chamber of Commerce. We've spent the last couple of weeks going through a process of interviews with each of the 7 candidates. And the committee met last week and made their decision on which candidates to endorse. So we wanted to take the opportunity to invite those candidates back so that we could ask further questions so that you would be familiar with their positions on what we feel are some key issues that are vital to the business community. And then following those 3 questions, we will open up for Q&A. So as we are spending the next roughly 20 to 30 minutes or so, please feel free to ask any questions that you have into the chat, type them into the chat, and then Oscar will be assisting me in getting those questions to our candidates. Oscar also set up a format this morning so that the candidates will have an idea of the timing. So there's a 1-minute slide that he has that will show up when there's 1 minute remaining. There we go. And then a stop at about 3 minutes. So that's how this will work.
And Kim, I think we were going to add that if your question does not get answered, obviously we can take that up, and you can always follow up with the candidates directly after the call, just to make sure everybody gets a chance.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. So let's see, the first question that we had here was just generally related to our situation with COVID. COVID has increased our need for city government support of our business community. What will you specifically do as a council member to partner with and support our business community? So if we could just start with Kuljeet for this question first, and then next time we'll go with Sally and then with Jonathan. So would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I got it, Kim. Thanks. Okay, well, thank you very much. Before I start, I want to thank the Chamber for endorsing me. I hope that means actually a good partnership with you, and I can learn from you. You guys think about this stuff a lot more than actually any of us as candidates do, so you probably have really good answers too. So I think, first of all, we have to be clear on something, which is that helping our businesses through COVID or anything else is not charity. Our city actually earns quite a bit of sales tax and TOT tax, TOT from these businesses, and it's essential as part of our revenue to provide services. So protecting that revenue is actually an essential activity that the city should do, not out of a charity and feeling bad for anybody. So the question is, how do we do this? There are 2 kinds of help, obviously. One is financial and the other is operational. So that's how I would sort of divide that, to be able to sort of think about this a little bit carefully. So financially, we did the $5,000 to every business, but after talking to several businesses, and I happen to know more businesses downtown than in other business districts, most of them actually survived through the total closure through PPP, not with our 5,000. The 5,000 hardly paid a month's rent. So that is when everything was shut, that's what kind of kept people going. So now the question is that we need to sort of really get our head around is that that's a much larger number than the $5,000 that the city could afford or put together. And the worst case scenario that can happen is if in the fall we have a resurgence of COVID, which shuts everything down. And that also happens to be the time when most retailers make all their profits. So to be shut down November, December, or January would be sort of disastrous for a lot of businesses. So I think the chamber and all need to start actually a task force now. Start thinking about that worst case scenario. What does that mean? To be able to, maybe we need to sort of activate and figure out how another PPP happens, etc. So my feeling is that I think this is a tough nut to crack, and we hope and pray that we don't get closing because of COVID again through the winter. Operationally, I think it's fairly straightforward in my mind, which is that what the city can do is find ways to get people downtown. The businesses know how to pull them in and sell things to them, and they know how to do their job. But we just need to get, the council can help get people in, and that we can do by finding ways to keep events going on in downtown that will actually bring people. I think I mentioned last time, if there was a Christmas market that started day after Christmas, I'll be there every day if they serve mulled wine. And I think we're going to have to think about those kind of things. So my thinking is that financially, I think that this could become a huge problem if it gets closed during winter, and there's no PPP. But I think the city needs to start thinking about that with the chamber now.
Okay, so I also want to thank the chamber and hope I can live up to your confidence and your endorsement, and if elected, certainly support our businesses in our 7 business districts in town. So Kuljeet made some very good points. Let me walk you through some of my thoughts about this. So City Council's job, I view as to listen, collaborate, facilitate, and implement plans. So I don't necessarily expect City Council to have the answers. So that's why we need to listen. So what are the problems the businesses are facing, retail and restaurant, what ideas? So how can we collaborate across the businesses, the city, the property owners, and the residents to identify some ideas that we can try? I think we made a good start in March when the council approved the open streets, but we need some permanent solutions. I participated in some of the early discussions, but kind of fell off that listening to that task force. So I don't feel I have a great current understanding after we've gone through the 6 or 7 months of open streets. What did we learn? What would we tweak? And so I would really like to be able to listen to the members of the chamber and what have their experiences been and what do they feel they need to succeed. So I'm pleased to see the wine barrels rolling out. What's that old song, Roll Out the Barrels or something? Well, it was before my time and I don't sing, so I won't subject you to that, but you get the point. We need some more longer term solutions. I think it was a little tough on everybody, including the city infrastructure wise, to open the streets on Thursdays and close them back up on Sundays. And some drivers are confused where they can turn when. And so I think the barrel approach will give us a longer term solution. Of course, we're heading into colder and wet weather. Oh, I only have 1 minute already, my goodness. So I think once we collaborate and get some ideas, then City Council should help put those in place. I think we need to look at our ground floor zoning. How can we open up? We did this along First Street and opened up some of the zoning to allow personal fitness services, for example. What can we do along state and Maine to potentially bring in some new businesses? We've lost some, unfortunately, but how can we get more creative? And what aspects of the downtown vision might we look at implementing now? So can we revitalize and stabilize at the same time? So again, listen, collaborate, facilitate, and implement. That's what I think council's job should be.
Great. Thank you, Sally. And Jonathan.
So good morning, and thank you very much to the Chamber for your endorsement. I really do appreciate it. The reality is that I don't have the answer to this question. I think that the answer to this question has to come from the business community first. The goal of council, as I see it when it comes to the business community, is to provide a lifeline so that our businesses can stay afloat, they can continue to employ people, they continue to serve the needs of the residents, and of course, they continue to provide taxes for our city coffers. That's something that Kuljeet has brought up at the forums last week, and he's absolutely right. I wish that I had been talking about on the campaign trail as much. So I think that really the best course of action is to start putting together a plan. And I think that council and the chamber and the other stakeholders in the community need to really think about what is it that the business community needs that the council, that the city is able to actually offer the business community. And I don't think that there's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think that whatever the council can do to help the business community is going to depend upon the various business locations throughout the city, the type of businesses. You know, we certainly saw that there was a little bit of tension between retailers and restaurants when the street closures first started. But let's see what our different communities and our different types of businesses need that council can actually provide. And then once we've identified what council can do, let's put a lot of thought into how we are actually going to implement that plan. The more that you plan, the more you strategize, the more you try to troubleshoot in advance, the more effective any type of a plan is going to be. Once a plan is put together, I think that plan has to be messaged. What the city council can do is make sure that the plan is promoted as much as possible, whether it's on the city's website or through social media. There are a lot of tools that the city council has, and all of those tools should be used to promote getting people to go to our businesses along El Camino or downtown. And then finally, we've got to be flexible and nimble. Once a plan is put together, let's see how it operates and let's see what we can do to make it better. And the street closures were really an excellent example of that, weren't they? I mean, they didn't stay the same. As the needs of businesses change, we changed with the plan that was put into effect. Specifically, I think that the city council should take a leadership position. Kuljeet is absolutely right that the $5,000 grant is not what's ultimately going to save our businesses, but I think that the symbolism is really important. And I would like to see that the city do another round of that. We can do some fundraising. Frankly, I'd like to go back to Los Altos Hills and ask them to do their part. That this is something else that Kuljeet called out Los Altos Hills on last week. And I'm glad that he did, because I agree with him 100% for doing that. Let's promote the new parklets. Let's work with the media to try to spread the news, get people to go to our business districts, keep them vibrant, make them even more vibrant, get money coming into our community.
Sound like excellent ideas. Just so you know as well, the Chamber is partnering with the representatives from the city and from LAVA to put forth a plan for our merchants as we go into this holiday season for shopping early, and then also shop, dine, and be local is going to be the theme for that. We'll have more of that kind of Christmas market feel downtown that you had mentioned, Kuljeet. So we're pulling our resources together to address that. So just a little insider information. Our next question then is on the topic of the challenges of the current city council, be that in leadership and litigation, dysfunction of meetings, whatnot. And I'd like for you each to really kind of highlight your areas of concern and what you would specifically do to address this. And Sally, you're up first.
Okay, let me make sure now I'm not muted. So this is a big topic. It comes up at pretty much every forum. And so we've, so one theory, I'll give you my own theory, is that one reason council is not effective is they don't want to make decisions. And because they, and what they can avoid by not making decisions is not moving forward on certain things. And some of those things are housing projects that we need to move forward on, or they obstruct them, and then we end up in lawsuits. So we have, I think, a tactic. This is just my opinion. So they certainly haven't said this, but we have a tactic where if you don't make decisions, then nothing's going to change. So I think that one of the key aspects that council has to focus on is not just how you conduct the meetings, which leaves a bit to be desired as well. You know, each council member should be professional and focused and understand key questions and focus on those to drive forward. But you also need to make decisions. And sometimes it's certainly valid to ask for more information and bring things back. But how many hours and hours and meetings have we seen things go by and decisions aren't made? And again, as I said, sometimes you got to wonder whether that's actually part of the strategy. So I would drive towards decisions. If you're not going to be making decisions, then don't waste everyone's time with these agenda items. So I'd also like to point out that one thing is there seems to be a level of dysfunction between council and staff. Our staff does the day-to-day work of the city, and it's very important that they're treated with respect and given the training and the support to do their jobs well. And as all the our state laws are changing, a lot of that workload rests squarely in staff's ballpark. And if they're not trained, if they're not supported to do their jobs, if they're berated in public and made the scapegoat of difficult situations, then our staff is not going to know how to do their jobs. They're not going to be motivated to do their jobs. And in fact, it's going to be difficult for Los Altos to recruit good staff. As I've attended training forums as a commissioner, and I say, oh, I work at Los Altos, they say, wow, what's going on there? Nobody wants to work in Los Altos. I mean, so when you talk to some of the council and they said, oh, we need to get rid of this person or that person and bring in this great other person to take their place. Well, those people don't want to work here. So let's have a constructive and functional atmosphere. Let staff and council work together. Let's do proper professional HR techniques and treat people with respect. And let's move forward and try to get things done professionally.
Perfect. Thank you, Sally. Jonathan, I'd like to go next.
I think Sally did a phenomenal job talking about the proper relationship between council and staff. And I agree 100% with everything she just said. Los Altos really has developed an us versus them mentality, especially over the last 2 years, but even going before that. And I absolutely hate it. That us versus them, we've got to win, there's no compromise type of a mentality is terrible for the community. It really tears us apart. And I've seen it on the campaign trail, I've seen it in council, and I don't want to be a part of that. I have 2 young children. I have a 12-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter who live with me. And I'm a role model for them. Our leaders should be role models for our community. That's why it is so important for the council members themselves to be polite, to follow process, to be respectful, not just of each other, but of staff and of the residents who come to speak and the other stakeholders that come before council. There is no reason to bring invective or personal attacks. Quite the contrary, there's a reason to keep them out of public debate. I think that council needs to strive to be collaborative. And the way of showing that you're being collaborative is to try to get 5-0 votes on as many issues as possible. In order to get a 5-0 vote, people are going to have to be willing to compromise. Compromise does not equal capitulation. We have a deliberative process in our government for a reason. There are different ideas. There are different ways of looking at problems. And just because someone doesn't agree with someone else doesn't mean that one of them is wrong. It just means that values might not be the same. But a solution usually comes somewhere in the middle. That's the way our government is set up. That's what I believe. I think that in order to reach that 5-0 vote, not only do you have to be willing to compromise, but members of council have to actively listen, really try to understand what are the issues, what are the concerns that people have. The Brown Act, which is so important in making sure that we have an open government, means that the deliberative process is even more important. As a member of council, I'm only going to be able to talk to one other council member in depth about any particular issue. That means that I'm not going to get all the perspectives. I'm not going to get all the points of view. When we're having debate, I need to be able to listen to other perspectives, and I need to have the confidence in myself and the trust in my colleagues that I can change my point of view, that I can say, this is what I believed in the first place, but now I've heard different arguments, and I'm starting to think that maybe a different approach might be better. And finally, I think ego has to be left behind as much as possible. If a council member is wrong on an issue, then they're wrong on an issue. You know, there's this terrible labeling of, oh, this politician's a flip-flopper, they changed their perspective. Well, if a different perspective is the right perspective, then there's no shame in changing your point of view. That's the right thing to do.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And Kuljeet?
That's great, thank you. So, you know, I think this is a very important topic just because directionally, I think we need to set a precedent on how the council needs to run. Just like Sally and Jonathan said, you know, the council is a governing body, a city manager is a CEO. We need to go back and have this conversation to say the day-to-day running of the city has to be done by the CEO or the city administration. And the council needs to focus on actually building, their main job needs to be building a shared vision, shared strategy, shared direction, building consensus about things that are going to impact us 2 years, 5 years down the road. And I think that the council can actually be quite productive and useful in doing that. I think I've thought about this enough that I think there's even a prescription for it. I think the council needs to spend maybe a quarter of its time on its agenda on things that are going to impact us 5 years from now. The council needs to spend a quarter of its time on things that are going to impact us 2 years from now. The council needs to spend a third quarter of its time on just actually doing performance evaluations, giving encouragement, and setting the a quarterly direction for the staff so they're doing their work. And maybe only a quarter of the time needs to be dealt with escalations that come from staff or residents on day-to-day issues. It should be an exception. Anytime the council is doing the flip of that, I think we are not doing the job, which is to build a consensus in the city on our strategy, direction, vision. Because we're so reactive and last minute is the only reason we have this litigation and this no shared, no vision. You know, we all want pretty much the same thing. You know, we're fortunate that Los Altos is a very homogeneous town. You know, you go to Los Altos, Sunnyvale, and 94089 people have nothing to do. Their life does not intersect with the people who live in 94087. You know, our town is not like that. Our schools are the same. We all have the same backstory, etc. We just don't know how to have this conversation because we don't have a shared vision built together. No one wants to have, you know, a 5G health hazard for somebody. That conversation should have happened 2 years ago when 5G rollout plans came out. That was the job of our city engineer 2 years ago. We need to start having, you know, a lot of conversations about the future of our town. Where's our fire contract? What happens if CUSD pulls out of Montclair, which is a possibility? You know, what happens to our library 5 years from now? What are smart cities? What do they look like? Why are we not one in the middle of all, of the universe that creates all this stuff? There's a lot of forward-looking stuff the council can work on. I can assure you our agenda will be full, it'll be enriching, it'll be a very productive conversation if we can just leave the city staff to do their day-to-day job. Thank you.
Kuljeet. And then we have the third question, which is related to housing, affordable housing especially. Uh, in general, the addition of ADUs alone will not satisfy our RHNA numbers. Partnering with other cities puts the onus on them to provide the land and solve the problem. What will you do in Los Altos? Would you support upzoning R1 areas adjacent to El Camino corridor to offer a variety of housing types, such as fourplexes and duplexes? Or what else would you specifically explore as solutions for Los Altos? Will you partner with school district to create new projects? Please explain. And you're first, Kuljeet. No, Jonathan. Is that right? Yeah, Jonathan.
Thanks. So I really like the way that the chamber asked this question, because often when we talk about housing, the school districts are a bit of an afterthought. And people who are more concerned about having higher density or increased housing in Los Altos sometimes say, well, it's going to be a strain on the schools. How can we do that to them? They're not going to want it. I'm not convinced that that's true. And when we're looking at increased housing density in Los Altos, I think that a missing piece of the analysis has been the school districts themselves. If we're looking at the possibility of approving a development that's going to increase density, let's find out what the school district's business development offices think. When we have more parcels and the parcels are at market rate or even near market rate, that's more money that's coming into not just our coffers, but to the school district's coffers. As Kuljeet mentioned, some of the school districts are thinking about closing some of the schools down, and part of that is budgetary, but part of that is also declining enrollment. So bringing more students into Los Altos, I don't think that that's something that the school districts are necessarily going to oppose, but we should find out what they think. And I haven't seen that done enough by council. I think that that's an opportunity to really get a clearer, more complete answer to the question. Now, in terms of upscaling R1 units right behind El Camino, I would not make a blanket policy statement that, yes, I support that. I am absolutely open to the idea, but I would not either support or oppose it without seeing a specific proposal. Now, we are going to have higher buildings along El Camino. That argument, I think, is now complete, and everyone acknowledges that we have to have higher density there, and plans are in place to go up along El Camino. If we're going up along El Camino, you're going to have very tall buildings right next to one or maybe two-story residences. There's going to be a big shadow. There's going to be less daylight. So logically, it does make sense to me that we would start to go up, whether it comes to fourplexes or eightplexes, what have you, behind the El Camino corridor. It's going to be controversial. I understand that, but I think it's something we have to be open to. On a broader scale, I think that in order to meet our new RHNA obligations, which are going to be more than 2,000 over the next 8 years, there's going to have to be some hard choices that we make. We've got to look at higher density housing in downtown, in the southern part of the city, maybe along the expressways, maybe parking lots at schools and churches. I know there was legislation that was talked about in Sacramento about doing that. But the reality is that if we're going to meet our RHNA obligations, we're going to have to make some very hard choices. And if we don't make those choices, then those choices are going to be taken away from us, and the state is going to take away any ability that we have to control the scope and scale of development in Los Altos. I want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So it's a problem that we've got to tackle from the very beginning. We've got to start running on the ground now.
Thank you, Jonathan. Kuljeet?
Is it Sally or me?
I think you're next, Kuljeet, if I'm rotating through.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I'm glad you asked this. I mean, in a way that I think we can actually have a discussion about tactically what would you do, because I think there's been a lot of, like Jonathan said, a lot of statements made about, yes, in fact, I think our Los Altos City website says we support this, and I think it's been on the website for years that we are for affordable housing. So the question is, how do we actually do this if we are in complete agreement that we need to do this? I would sort of say that I think we need to think about all of our 7 commercial districts as possible multi-use facility places. You know, I think if Loyola or Woodmont, all of those places actually got some housing along with the shops, etc., I think it'll actually help those business districts, frankly. And I think there's enough space there for us to be able to put things on Foothill Expressway. Maybe the houses are closer to Foothill and the parking's flipped and it's on the backside towards the residential or something. I mean, we have smart people like Sally who can tell us how to do planning and land use. I'm just saying that I think those are the places where this can happen, and it sort of seems logical. The other thing that I think that is important to keep in mind is that no matter how much zoning, et cetera, we change, the only way actually houses actually get built is somebody who has a vested interest in it, and it's not just a builder. I can assure you, if you give any builder a choice between building a multi-unit housing, spending 2 years getting permits through the city or whatever, or building a $5 million house in Los Altos and selling it the day it's built, they would rather do the single family $5 million house. So it has to be somebody who has a vested interest in building that housing. And school districts, I think, are ideal for that. You know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, Cupertino School District JPA was passed just before COVID, so they haven't done anything. But we will hear about it next year. You know, they are going to build housing on West Valley College, I think, is what I heard from the president. And they're going to follow the Stanford model. You know, 5 to 15 years from now, their portfolio is going to have a balance sheet that is so rich just because the value of their property has gone up that it may actually help them be a more successful school district. So I think Los Altos School District doing that in building houses on Los Altos schools would help Los Altos meet greener numbers. So yes, I think we do need to bring somebody else with a vested interest in this thing, and then I think it can happen. So I would say commercial districts and the schools is probably where I would focus on first.
Excellent. Thank you, Kuljeet and Sally.
Right. So our RHNA number, Regional Housing Needs Allocation, is 477 by 2023. We're certainly not going to hit that. And then, as Jonathan mentioned, we're likely to quadruple those numbers. So there's not been a lot of teeth in that, i.e. if we don't hit it, what happens to us? But what we do see happening is, I think, that the state comes forward with more laws. So there's not necessarily a specific penalty for Los Altos, but the local control, as the mantra goes, slips away. If we don't deliver our commitments, then the state is going to get more and more hands-on with helping us do that. So let me talk about First Street. So this is an area where there's been a lot of proposals. I think this ties in with the first question about how can we help businesses. This is, I'm not sure that maybe only one of the proposals that has come forward to council along First Street has actually been approved. If that, I've lost track of what they've done with it. But if you can imagine, if we had a thriving corridor of condos there, this adds feet on the ground. 3, Abby's telling me that 3 have actually been approved by council. Maybe that's not what her 3 meant, but imagine condos, imagine these people who can walk into town and eat, and, you know, instead of the office workers, which are on the ground during the day, we get residents who are in town at night. I mean, this will create a thriving environment. Let's also talk about the fact that we really have what they call missing middle housing in Los Altos. And this is medium density that provides, let's just call it a bungalow environment. That's not an accurate description, but close enough. And teachers and staff, city staff and others might be able to find housing. There are some pockets of land around town. When I interviewed with our friends at FOLA, one of the former mayors mentioned, you know, there's pockets, there's 7 or 8 pockets of land around town. Well, I don't know what those are, but let's look at those. Can we turn those into missing middle? I live by Los Altos Nursery, which is probably going to be sold any day now. That's essentially 3 single family lots. That could be missing middle housing. So we're increasing density, but we're doing it in a more rural scale that would fit in potentially well and maybe get less opposition. But again, we've really got to get council focused on approving projects rather than obstructing them. And another proposal that disappeared from council's agenda was to implement impact fees. I know you realtors will cast me the evil eye for saying this, but we can use the funds generated from impact fees to subsidize further below market rate units. And I'm told to stop. So anyway, that's some of the things we can think about doing.
Thank you, Sally. I'll go to our questions that have been submitted from members here, and I'll start first. Unless you'd like to ask your question directly, Harry, would you like to ask your question, or I can read it here as well.
The visual of a massager of ideas as a council is phenomenal. Can you imagine all those people sitting there warming up their oil to massage on the council chambers?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, Kuljeet read my question. It is, quote, "We've had many vision studies about our downtown, which have resulted in financial outlays while serving to delay implementation of any action. How can a city council shorten delays and become a council of action rather than a massager of ideas?" You take the order, Kim. I don't know the order.
So we can go back to the beginning again. So Kuljeet would be first.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to some level, I do agree that the process is that we have to have a shared vision before we can implement things. So I don't know if you need to take 2 years or 3 years like we've been doing in the past. Some of these things can take much less time. I completely agree. I think the implementation then has to be handed over. The council cannot be the thing that's standing in the middle of a vision and the implementation plan. So I think if we can take the council out of the process where it says, okay, there is now a shared vision and we have a strategic direction, somebody else go build this. But you know, if we're gonna have council meetings where we sort of decide on the color of the paint and the size of the parking slots, then of course that's kind of a complete you know, misuse of the time, and we turn into a totally useless exercise in my mind. So I would say that, you know, just hand over. You know, the council needs to do the vision, get an agreement, build consensus among residents, and then hand it over to people who are implementing.
Sally.
Well, I think this is another area, looking back at what I said before about potentially avoiding making decisions as a strategy or tactic for the town. And so when we have essentially two and a half council, you know, one person goes back and forth and maybe votes. So we end up with a lot of 3-2 votes. In that scenario, it's very hard to get any agreement on moving forward on anything. And I think we've seen that happen in quite a few scenarios. I mean, the community center was a 3-2 vote, despite the previous council having unanimously suggested moving it forward. So you can imagine what might happen as we look at downtown vision and implement things, even though that was a tremendous community effort with a lot of input. And I think the majority of people look at that as having a good menu of options to choose between. But you have to have a council who's willing to move forward on things. And you have to, I saw there was a comment about stacking the commissions. We've got commissions that are now being, you know, populated with, again, some of this no change philosophy. So it makes it very difficult to get anything done in town. So I think a lot will ride on this election. Can you get people in there who are willing to make decisions, and in fact willing to make decisions when the whole audience that comes in to tell you that you're all wrong and you're ruining Los Altos, can you make decisions in the face of those angry voices? And, you know, it's a hard thing to do. I think we've probably all watched the council people struggle with this. And you're kind of say afterwards, well, why did they decide that? They know that wasn't the right vote, but it is very hard when those angry people are there in your face or on next door. But don't let me get on that platform right now. So anyway, it will really take the vote to put, if the majority of people in Los Altos put in council people who are willing to make forward-looking decisions versus regressive, then we can have change. If that doesn't happen, then it's not going to happen for at least 2 more years. So I don't think there's any way around that.
Thank you, Sally and Jonathan.
Yeah, so let me start by saying that I love the downtown vision. And if I had a magic wand, I think that I would want to, I think that I would want to make it happen yesterday. Now I've been on record, and I still believe that I think the downtown vision ultimately is aspirational. I don't see everything in it coming into fruition. But one thing that I think we should acknowledge about the downtown vision is that it's another example of the us versus them mentality that has kind of developed both on council and in the community. A tactic that we often see when interest groups or people don't like a policy is first they attack the policy on the merits, which is fair, that's reasonable. If they're losing the argument on the merits, then they attack the process. And if that doesn't work, then they attack the people behind who are in favor of the policy. There's been a lot of criticism of the policy of putting together the downtown vision, and quite frankly, I've never understood it. I don't know what more could have been done to get public input and to put together a downtown vision plan that really represented a cross-section of our community. So I think that the downtown vision is valid, and it's something that I want to see enacted. Now, here's the reality of the situation. Right now, Los Altos is most likely going to end up in a budget deficit. Okay, and before COVID, I think we projected a budget surplus, but the latest numbers that I've seen, and Kuljeet will be able to speak to better than I will, is that we're now expecting a budget deficit. So if we're going to move forward on the downtown vision, we've got to be able to justify it to the residents, to members of council, and to staff. And I don't know how that plays out yet. I think that if we're going to be serious about enacting any part of the downtown vision or enacting it as quickly as possible, the first thing we've got to do is understand what are the resources that are available to the council. And some of the options, some of the suggestions in the downtown vision are not going to be that expensive, but some of them will require some capital layouts, some capital expenditures. And if we're going to do that, we need to be responsible, we need to be wise about it. So if there's a delay in moving forward on the downtown vision, at least from my perspective, it wouldn't be because it's not something that we think should be done. It's not because I don't think it's a good plan. It's not because I don't think there was enough resident participation. It's that as a responsible council, we've got to prioritize where our money is going. And I think that having a vital downtown business community is important. It serves the residents, it brings in tax dollars, but the initial capital outlay simply has got to be accounted for. And I don't know how we do that yet.
Fair enough. Thank you, Jonathan. I'd like to ask one more question here that I see in the chat, and then I thought I would give you each an opportunity for a minute or so of wrap-up comments, and then we'll make a couple of housekeeping announcements as we're coming up against the end of the hour. Penny Lave asked a question about what is your feeling about additional support from the city for the Chamber of Commerce? So I thought I would go ahead and ask this question of all of you, as it used to be more of a PR function of the city. Sally, if you'd like to go first.
So let me see if I understand the question. So the question is really, what is the feeling about more monetary support of the chamber? Yeah.
Right.
Well, I completely support that. I mean, the chamber is driving a lot of the ideas and the changes that the city will help. And again, it goes back to that collaboration point. So, you know, the city council by itself can't do anything. The chamber by itself can't do anything. Businesses either. So I support the chamber. I supported the chamber early on in the pandemic, and I think you've been doing a great job. So I see no reason that we shouldn't do our part to help the chamber. It's a symbiotic relationship. What would we do without the chamber? I don't even want to think about it. So if that answers the question, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's fine, Sally. Thank you, Jonathan. And then Kuljeet.
Penny's hand is up, actually.
Oh,
Maybe.
Penny?
You're muted, Penny. You're muted, Penny.
Let's see if we can get Penny unmuted.
The city used to support the chamber monetarily, and it was really a pittance. I think it was $10,000 a year. And they did so on the basis that the chamber was the city's PR organ, that we didn't have one. And then a council, I believe it was the FOLA Council, did away with that. And I don't know if it's been reinstated or not, but I think that it's vital to the city to have the chamber to do that function.
Right. That helps me understand the question better. I didn't know that context, but definitely. I mean, we've supported other organizations. Sorry, my time was probably up, but I'm still going on. We've supported other organizations, and certainly the chamber deserves to be supported. I'll stop now.
Jonathan or Kuljeet?
Yeah, I have a point of view on it. I'm happy to. So I think it falls in the same category. You know, that I think if the chamber actually can promote businesses in town, and we can attract people who live up in San Mateo to come down and have a glass of wine outside the most beautiful little hotel in any city, why not, right? I mean, that actually helps the town, right? I mean, so. I think if it is maybe if people are concerned about it, we can say, okay, this is money for advertising and promotion only, as opposed to something else that the chamber may want to, or I'm not sure what the concern was, but I think if you're truly the PR arm and doing the advertising, I think it's essential. You know, let's promote our city. I mean, we have charm coming out of our wazoo. You know, let's use it. You know.
And Jonathan, do you have any thoughts?
I agree with everything Sally and Kuljeet said. An investment in the chamber is an investment in the city. The business community provides jobs, provides tax revenue, and provides services and goods to the community. Let's work with the business community as much as we can. The chamber is an interest group that promotes businesses, and that's healthy for our economy. That's healthy for our city.
I really appreciate our partnership with the city and council members, city staff and whatnot. So look forward to continuing that, of course. I do see one last question that's come up here from a couple of individuals about Prop 15, if each of you support or are against it.
Which order?
So let's see, where are we at? Kuljeet first.
Sure. Actually, I think Mary Prochnow would actually help us explain this a little bit better. My understanding of Prop 15 is that it says that if you're a building of over a certain size in dollar value and assessment, that your property tax is going to be current as opposed to being frozen to the year you bought it. My concern with it is that if that building has a triple net lease, all of that property tax is going to get forwarded to the retailers or the offices that actually rent that space. So if we are looking at this as a way to increase the burden of this thing on the people who rent that, then it will work. But so I'm a little confused as to what the objective of Prop 15 is. That they think if it's a tax on the landlord, then unfortunately it's going to be passed over right away. So I'm not clear unless the language in Prop 15 that I don't know. So that was my question for Mary, is there some way to say that from now onwards there shall be no more triple net leases where this can be passed on? Otherwise it's the prop is going to fail in terms of its objective.
Mary's unmuting.
Either that or she's cleaning her screen.
No, so I've got the ballot in my hand. Its property is worth $3 million or more. which is basically any commercial building in town. And the reason I raise the issue is when you go up and down Main Street, the vast majority of properties have been owned for decades. And while I don't use triple net, virtually everybody else does. So they will be passed through. There will be some argument about that back and forth, but that's what's going to happen. The proposition allowed me to keep rent. For instance, for Harold, who was here 31 years, that would not have happened had we had an assessment that continued to rise. We were able to keep him at quite a low rate. So I think it would have a dramatic effect on our Main Street. Newer buildings, it's not so much an effect because you have a more recent tax basis. But on those that are owned for a long time, it will have a dramatic effect on our downtown, in my opinion.
Right. That's why I don't think this makes sense.
But unfortunately, a lot of people will look at it as being an easy way to get more property tax.
Right. It's cloaked as a way to sort of, stick it to the rich landlord, but the reality is it's going to hit the people who rent the space. Yeah. So it's unfortunate.
I believe that the target was people like Macy's who can sell the entire corporation and still maintain the low property tax. And I think, get a lot of agreement on that. The enormous corporations. But when you get to the downtowns of California, it's a whole different story. And I think will have a dramatic impact.
Yeah, so it needs to be worded better, right? So that if you are actually an owner-occupied space, maybe then it might serve the objective. It's still a question whether this is the way to get the revenue, but the way it is now, it's just misguided.
Not even. And it's. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Sally.
No, I was going to say more than that, the threshold is just way too low. I mean, it impacts, certainly for Los Altos, it impacts every mom and pop. You could see it if it really had a threshold that was targeting large businesses, chain businesses, but it just, I completely agree with everything that's been said. And really that threshold is just completely wrong.
We'll have to talk further about that and how we can address that with the chamber and our community in further discussion. That sounds important.
Thank you all. I got to run. Bye.
Thank you, Harry. Jonathan, did you have any other thoughts on that? And then we'll close.
Yeah, so I have a contrary point of view, and it may sound weird for the real estate lawyer to say this. And I have clients who would not like it, but Prop 13, when it was originally enacted, was designed to be a tool to help make sure that older adults would be able to stay in their homes in a time of rising property values. And in a way, I think Prop 13 has actually helped property values rise even more incrementally. All the criticisms that were just brought up about Prop 15 are completely valid. But when I look at the bigger picture and the revenues that the state of California need to generate and what the economy looks like and the opportunities for incentivizing redevelopment of older communities, older downtowns like ours, I think it makes sense. I think that there are safeguards in place. I do wish the threshold was higher. I think I wish it was much higher. It is certainly not a perfect piece of proposed legislation, but it's one that I'm going to be saying yes to because I think in the grand scheme of things, while it may not be great for Los Altos, I think that it is a yes is a better result for the state than a no.
Thank you, Jonathan. In closing, I wanted to have Oscar just share briefly about a presentation that we have available to our community tomorrow. Oscar, if you could share a bit about that.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to tell you when to be quiet. That was kind of fun from my end. So tomorrow we have speaking about downtown businesses and so forth, the changes that are happening. We have this talk, it's a webinar on how much is my business worth, the importance of doing a business evaluation. It's from 10 to 11. Again, it's free. And just go to the Chamber's website under the event section and go ahead and register. But again, it's going to be a very, I think it's a very timely topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar. In closing, I have one last thing to share with you, and I would ask for your support as we are working with the Chamber raffle. This year, we've collected close to 100 prizes donated from our restaurants and retailers, service providers. We are selling tickets for the raffle. If you are selected, you will get to choose the prize that best suits you. So it's not a random drawing. You will get to choose from the available prizes. If there's any way that you can help us by sharing this raffle with your network, this is our way of raising funds for the Chamber this year. We're unable to have the golf tournament because of COVID, and really doing our best in the last 7 months to support our small business community in any way possible. And this helps to give us the funds to be able to continue the work that we do. The prizes range from a diamond necklace to a cruise, a wool rug from the rug gallery, dinners out, shopping sprees, all kinds of wonderful things. Los Altos Hardware, you can find something on the list from your favorite retail or a restaurant provider, I'm certain. So call our office to purchase your tickets, and let me know if there's any way that you would be willing to help share this information with your network. And in closing, thank you so much for your participation here today to our three council candidates. Appreciate your service to our community and your partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. And is there any last closing remarks that you have, Joe?
No, same thing. Thanks everyone for coming out today, and thanks to the candidates, and wish them all the best the upcoming election. It's a crazy time out there.